We would like to, we don't know how regular these kinds of public scholarship seminars will be, but our sense was that that we needed to, help ourselves figure out this new charge that we've received from President Oaks and from the university. And so we thought that we would start with kind of what we know, because there's a lot about what we don't know. And we asked if Betsy Vandenberg would come and talk to our group about the services, how she's worked with some of us and what she does. Because we think that is a model, not the only model, but a model that maybe could help us in our public scholarship efforts. So I've asked Betsy to come introduce herself a little bit to us, and then talk to us about how we can be better public scholars. Thanks.
Go for it. Okay, well, thank you. I don't know if some of you want to scoot up. I hang out with my 94-year-old mother a lot, so I talk loud, and I'm half deaf in one ear, and so, I don't know. I'll try and get this to the back of the table. You're good back there? Okay. Well, anyway, it's really an honor to be here, collaborating with some of you, Dave and Alan in particular, over the past decades, really, has just been extremely meaningful. And Alan asked me to give a little bit of my background, kind of how this strange merger occurred. And so I'll go ahead with that, but I just, again, want to thank you for letting me combine my latent academic ambitions with my writing interests in a very meaningful way. So in the early 80s, when I graduated from high school, I had ambitions to get a PhD in English, and my undergraduate was a weird conglomeration of the Claremont colleges, which charged a lot of money for private school tuition. Now it's less than BYU is, but back then it was too expensive for my parents, so I ended up transferring to the University of Utah. I did go on 2 BYU study abroad, so I spent just about as much time. I spent a third of my time at BYU, the U, and Claremont. But anyway, I really wanted to go to the University of Chicago and get a PhD in English, but a boyfriend in Salt Lake City and a really generous stipend and scholarship offer at the University of Utah kept me there for a master's degree, which was a good thing. Even though the boyfriend didn't work out, the master's degree kind of showed me that I didn't know if I really wanted to get a PhD in English, and kind of, go into your general interest in literature just keeps narrowing down until you have to focus on really literary minutia that seems kind of meaningless. And it was back in the 80s when deconstruction and lit theory were sort of on the horizon and threatening to sort of take all the meaning out of the books that I liked so much. So anyway, I did finish up the master's, and it did teach me a lot about academic rigor and writing and making your argument and all that stuff. But then I went on to Harvard. Used to have a publishing course, the Radcliffe Publishing course, that is now merged in with Columbia, because it really should be in New York. But anyway, I ended up back there and had a very generous exposure to book and magazine publishing. And then again, sort of my upbringing and my LDS paradigm, I felt more comfortable staying in Boston, and I ended up working with in Addison Wesley textbook publishing, college textbooks. Again, that was a good comfort zone for me, and I wasn't sure how much I'd fit in with my friends that ended up working at Cosmopolitan, as we were just discussing with Lene, and Self magazine and some of these others. But anyway, that helped me to learn to be able to read just about anything, editing computer science manuals with absolutely no background whatsoever in that field was again a good practice for trying to approach different subjects and make sense of them and write them so a normal person can read them. Anyway, after a mission and ending up at the Ensign magazine and starting a family, fast forward to 1993 when I'm doing a few freelance jobs, and Jay Todd, the legendary, I don't know if anybody knew him.
Yeah, remember him.
Kind of, anyway, very interesting character. But he was managing editor of the Ensign and asked me if I'd be interested in this project, bringing together all this sociological material on religion and working with a social science professor down here. Who is it? I was trying to remember. Is it Darren? Darren, was he somebody that somebody remembers? I can't remember his name. But anyway, he fed me all this material with a lot of skepticism. And I remember bringing my third child down here, nursing him, while I was sort of getting grilled about whether or not I could really pull this together and whether or not it would make sense. And I can understand his skepticism. But it ended up being one of my favorite things I've ever written, Religion and the Abundant Life. And I think that's what spurred Dave. When was it? What year was that? I don't know. Sometime in the 90s. 97.
Yeah, that would have been about 1997 or 98.
Right. To convince me that I could contribute to the proclamation books coming out in 2000, and also to convince me that I could tackle this foreign new mode of communication called email. Do you remember that? And I was absolutely sure I couldn't do it, but wow, thanks for getting me on board email, Dave, if for nothing else. Glad I know how to do that. So anyway, that from there, I don't know, Alan and I combined on a project on the remake in 2010, and
that was the most fun thing I've ever written.
That was really fun.
I just had so much fun with
that. That was fun. It's just been a great experience, and we've gone on. Alan and I have gone on to do the National Marriage Project together and write for First Things and Real Clear Policy. And Dave, I've mainly written about his work. And we're thinking of a few more collaborations, but anyway, it's just, we were just talking, Lene and I, about how I love to write, but I don't want to write stuff that my conscience doesn't feel good about and that I don't find meaningful. And this has just been a very meaningful thing. I mean, some women can and make quilts, and I like to collaborate on these projects. So let's just get started now with the bulk of what Alan would like me to discuss with you, and that's how writing to a broader audience is different from writing to an academic audience. So we'll start with the process, which, especially in working with Alan, I've realized how different it is, because he's used to, and you're used to, submitting this, spending years and months, and I've got a son at University of Chicago now, and so, anyway, be still my heart. That's just coming up with these ideas and then spending so much time circling them around or whatever. But we've kind of had to flip-flop that. And I've said, look, Alan, if we're interested in publishing this, just give me your idea and I'll see if an editor's interested in it. Don't waste your time. They don't care if it's vetted. I mean, if it's interesting and it's kind of what they're running with, I mean, you'll want it vetted in your own way, but yeah, don't waste your time kind of with a final product. It's in general, especially if you're working with, I don't know, not these huge biggies. We'll get to the biggies in a minute. Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, those places, they're kind of a different animal. But, these other journals and magazines, it's almost always better to submit your ideas in a compelling query letter, which Dave and your partner so you guys came up with a fantastic query letter, ran that by me, that you submitted to the Atlantic, and now after rejection we have a possibility. So anyway, but that was just a perfect example of it's written in a very compelling way. You have a definite thesis there. It's I don't know. It gives the editor a real strong feeling for where you're going, but isn't just 5 paragraphs. I mean, 1 or 2 at the most is enough. They're running through these queries all the time, and you just want something to catch their eye and give them a hint of where it's going. So if you can come up with something like that, that's very helpful. And usually, it's hard to wait. Your tendency would be to query 5 people at a time. I'm always tempted to do that, but it's better to just wait a few days, and then you can feel good about moving on. If it's been a week, you haven't heard from anybody, move it to someplace else. But then they may come back to you a couple months later. That's very interesting, and I'd like to talk about that afterward. But if you're going for these big places, I think New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, LA Times, just know that it's sort of like winning the lottery, and fantastic writers submit their stuff and don't get published. But, you could be the needle in the haystack with just the thing they're looking for, and if you're going for that, I would try and come up with something that's less than 1,000 words. I would write the piece, and they've got a general submission. I don't know anybody there. I know very few people that know people there, but they have a general submissions, and they do look at them, and they do pass them on. And if you've written something quite succinct and smallish, 700 might be 700 words. I can't for the life of me get something to 700 words, but if you could keep it around 1,000, that would be ideal to submit there. And they do have, I think they do have these subsections that I think are more helpful and more likely to get published in. Washington Post has an on faith section. Many of these papers have family sections. There's always New York Times Modern Love, but unless you're like leaving the traditional family paradigm to go experiment, it's very unlikely you're going to get in there. And anyway, but we'll go into that a little more. And maybe, let's just segue into it now. It is hard to run. Sorry, if I put the glasses on, I can't see you. If I don't have them on, I can't see this. But if you're running a somewhat socially conservative, more religious piece, moral, I don't know, / what would you call it? I don't know. Is there a sociological term for that?
We call it a proclamation friendly.
If you're running a proclamation friendly piece, I'm pretty cynical about some of those big places running it. I once submitted a query letter to my friend in publishing, gave me the name of the on faith editor at Washington Post. She really liked my idea. I can't even remember what it was, but said, yes, we're definitely interested. How soon can you get it to us? Blah, blah, blah. And then, but when the final thing came through to her, it was a definite no. It just was not going in the progressive direction that she wanted it, and and it ended up in First Things. So, that's why I tend to stick to my comfort zones, which are Real Clear Politics are actually truly bipartisan. You look at their website. I don't know if you frequent that website, but they run stuff from both sides. They've got stuff from The Nation. They've got stuff from the American Conservative. They've got a real nice mix in there. And they're very open to everything. And so they published our policy piece. Their religion sections published me. And I've gotten good people to work with there. And First Things is very interested. They're hungry for any kind of bolstering of the traditional family.
So say a little bit more about First Things.
First Things.
It's Catholic.
It's Catholic. It's heavily Catholic. I think they went through a phase where they didn't like Mormons, and now they're liking us more. And they've published, a friend of mine, I'm going to give you his name, Nathan Nilsson. He works for Mormon Newsroom. They've published a couple of things that he's written. I try to make them, I've written since 2012, I've written essays for their web exclusives, and some of them I insert my Mormonism into, not in a theological way, but definitely in a moral way, and they always run it. They are heavily Catholic and run a lot of pieces where you have to be very Catholic conversant to even understand what they're talking about. But they're also Jewish friendly, Protestant friendly. I mean, they're fairly interfaith ecumenical. I mean, now their print section, I do First Things Online. Their print section, you can go a lot longer than the 1,200 words they max out on online. But the print section, so you can publish a really long piece there, but if you want it to get out and around, it's probably behind a paywall. And it's not on their online section. In general, the online stuff gets around a lot more but I don't think it carries the prestige weight that the print does, but then you don't get quite the readership that you do online, and it's not easily passed around. So, but they've been great to work with, and I really like their editing, and I really like working with them. So where to go from that? So the Atlantic, that's okay. Let's go to them. They're somebody that they used to publish Barbara DeVoe Whitehead. Didn't they do her? And they've had a really nice. They lean progressive in some ways, but then they'll publish more proclamation-friendly stuff. I haven't seen a lot of proclamation-friendly stuff for a long time, and so, but they do have an LDS writer there, McKay Coppins. I don't know if any of you know him. He was editor at the Daily Universe, then he went to BuzzFeed, and he's ended up at the Atlantic. Now he's, I've seen his Twitter taking down the New York Times obituary of President Monson that was very negative. He kind of came out in defense of the church.
He's
on that.
He covers Republican politics for
he's
the
very
Atlantic.
very political. So they've got a Mormon there, and also another name I wanted to give you, and I've got a list. I've got my. If I'm rambling here, I've got my bullet points here. We'll hand out. Let's see. Did anybody, this sort of made the rounds. So Hal Boyd at the Deseret News, he's the op-ed, he's the opinion page editor at the Deseret News, and he wrote this as recently as January 10th, a couple weeks ago, The Progressive Art of Shaming Mormons. And then he wrote something for the Atlantic, I think in December. But so he would be a great one to partner with that's already, doing stuff for them. So there are people that break into it. And then Dave, the query letter that you sent, I thought it was a fantastic query letter. I mean, that's better than I could do. And anyway, so at first, and I gave a couple, they've considered a couple of things that I've written and passed them around. So I have a couple of editors' names there. And interestingly, Alan and I put the consensual non-monogamy piece with them first, and they did consider it for a while before ultimately saying no. But and just as an illustration, so they took a month to kind of mull it around, and then as soon as I sent it to First Things, they wanted it immediately. And I don't know if this is illustrative of what it's illustrated of, but then we wanted it at like at least 4,000 words, 3,000 words, and and we wanted it in the print piece so that it didn't have to be a 700-word op-ed. And they said, okay, write it. But then when they got it in, Rusty Reno maybe wondered about whether or not CNM was, what was the wording they used on that, Alan? He's just not sure of the significance.
It was just a silly fad, or
So anyway, they wanted to run it online, but it would mean we'd have to cut it by 75%. And so I had a friend at Real Clear Politics who'd moved over to National Review. I sent it to him, and he wanted it I mean, he wanted it, and I'd also sent a query to the American Conservative. They wanted it immediately. I mean, I'm just saying, the socially conservative publications, they want that stuff. The other stuff, I don't know whether we want to go this direction or not. But interestingly, after getting a no from the Atlantic, they've got an email this morning that they're going to consider it, actually. So that I'm coming now. I'm a lot more hopeful than, I don't know.
Can you flesh this query out a little bit? What is the query about, Dave?
Well, I'll let Lauren describe it. He'll do a better job of doing it today quickly.
The title of the proposed piece is The Real Book of Mormon Musical, and it draws on qualitative data from LDS families about the challenges of family home evening and perks and the upsides. It was actually stimulated in some ways by a Baptist colleague of ours in the Deep South who said, I wanted to do family devotionals for my family, and the best stuff out there is done by your church. Why are you hogging it? Why aren't you sharing it? And there are some adaptations that can be made. So we did a little thumbnail research on the success of Book of Mormon musical, and it's astonishing. And Betsy's written on that in the piece that you forwarded to us from 2013. Debunker, Mormon myth busting.
Yeah.
That was a great piece.
Well,
but it's similar kind of tone.
What's that?
I think in some ways the tone that we'd like to strike is similar. Not taking ourselves too seriously, but saying, here's what you've missed out on. Here's a peek behind the scenes. That's probably as much as you can do.
Yeah, and that's why I thought that query letter was funny, and it was, and so I think I gave Dave the name of, and again, I'm going to end the process part, but it's always just keep your emails. If somebody even rejects you, just keep their email, because it's so much better if you get a person and could submit your ideas to a person. It's so much better than the slush pile. And so, I gave Dave, I think, 2 emails, and one of them I'd worked with, and she's the one that said no thanks. But then it got around, and now you have a bite. And so definitely keep his email address and try to I mean, it's no guarantee, even if they say they're interested. But once they've told you they're interested and you go to some work from them and you've even emailed a couple times, they do feel obligated to take it seriously. I mean, they feel guilty at least turning you down again after they made you go to some work. So whatever relationships you can develop, I highly recommend it. But so let's get on to style, which I don't know, I feel like you really don't need this, but
No, we really do.
okay, because I think you're a great writer. I think Dave's I really have enjoyed, anyway, but maybe the name of the game is just more colloquial, more conversant, humor, if that's appropriate, and definitely avoiding long excerpts from, quote the research, back yourself up, but just try and find 1-2 sentences at the most that really say it, and plug those in here and there, but not these, giant excerpts that just are going to be way too long. Let's see. And okay, I know it's really hard for Dave and Alan to, what, you don't want everything cited? You're not going to put all my footnotes in there. How's anybody going to believe this?
So let me tell you what we do. So I send Betsy what I've written with all of my footnotes and citations, and then she ignores them. And and so I feel good. Okay, I've done that. I see, but then Betsy just writes it the way it needs to be.
Well, but we do put selective. I would be just choosy about and try and find whatever you're doing. I know it's hard. Try and find an online link that they can hyperlink, because you notice certain words and phrases will be either underlined or highlighted in an article, and you click it on, you go to the link, they'll do that for you, and I don't know how, like with Dave's article, I mean, you found some online places like that Notre Dame collection of
The Romance and Religion piece?
Yes.
Yeah, I tried to only use things that were online. When I wrote that piece, every minute, every time I was working on it, I thought, what would Betsy do? How can I get a Jane Austen? I'm gonna have a movie. And it was fun. What would Betsy do? Was my
Well,
mantra.
which I'm coming back to again. See, now I feel sheepish about First Things because they wanted to publish this thing online, and then I came back to them and said, well, sorry, National Review will give us 75% of the article, whereas you guys will give us the fourth, so we're going to go for them. So now I'm kind of coming back. Remember that query I sent you? But I am going to do it. I'm going to face up to it this week and go forward. So anyway, so try and just be really selective with what research you want. I mean, they'll want that because they don't get that from most of their writers, and they want to bolster these arguments, especially some of the places I'm talking about. So if you can send them, a minimum, a healthy amount of links without being academic, then that would be helpful. And then it always helps to connect your ideas to any current event. That's what you guys did in your query letter. You brought in the Book of Mormon musical. You brought in how they just had an article about Mormons or something like that. I don't know. Anything that's out in the news. Maybe you can come to Lene because you're going to need to spend a few hours completely wasting your life looking at social media, which I'm good at, and scrolling through, I don't know, websites. And I mean, Real Clear Politics is a good indication. They have a lot of different sections and right and left, and I tend not to read stuff on the left as much, so it's helpful for me to go there because they just bring in the main stuff on their page. If you can, usually, I mean, especially in your line of work, everything's topical, don't you think? I mean, you just, if you could sort of grab onto something, and especially, I hate to say it, but if it's trendy, that's all, it's like, I don't know, you just read the news feeds. I mean, I don't know when Me Too is going to trend off, but that's a big deal, and it seems like people can't get enough of it, and if there's anything that you can kind of relate to that, that's again, that kind of gives maybe at the bigger places the needle in the haystack that they're looking for, or a new take on it that they hadn't thought of before. So, and again, bringing in a book or a movie, you don't have to overdo it. Sometimes just even introducing it with that, then you can go on to the bulk of what you want to say, but just trying to think of some hooks to bring people in.
Hooks is the
hook is
the word,
the salient word. So length, again, that's a huge difference. I've never been able to pass off anything like that 3,000 word thing that National Review did. Usually, you're lucky if you can get 1,200. You'll get them to do 1,200. First things I always want is 900 words, and so I send in 1,100, and then, we kind of, get it to 1,000 or whatever. So, if you've got something very complex and lengthy, maybe you could just take a subsection of it and develop it. And again, don't feel like you have to spend 6 months of your life doing this. I mean, it'll be online for one day, hopefully get passed around and have a little bit of a shelf life. But, this isn't your career. It's not, you don't have to spend inordinate amounts of time. So if you kind of think of it as like 1,000 words, oh, okay, well, I've got a free afternoon. I'll fiddle around with this. And then I don't know. I know you have plenty else to do around this department. So, and finally, about the editing process, you turn it in, and then you can usually expect to hear back fairly soon, especially if we're talking online, and especially if it's topical. You'll hear back. The turnaround will be pretty quick, and hopefully they'll edit it. National Reviews, I thought they had a good editor, and First Things have really good editors, but some people under-edit, some people over-edit, and it's funny that I wasn't even going to bring this up, but the Real Clear Religion piece on Mormon missions, I hadn't worked with that editor before. He published he republished something I'd written in First Things about Mormons and evangelicals, and said, if you ever want to write something for us, send it in. So I sent it in, and I didn't hear anything back, and I kind of kept waiting. And then, probably about 3 or 4 days after that piece went up, I started getting these emails from Mormons, like in all over the world, like, thanks so much for that, that mission piece, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I go over to the thing, and there it is. It's been up. It's gone like the most viral I've ever had it, had anything go. And I'm going through there. I'm like, there's like 6 typos in here. There probably are still. I like was quite selective in there. I'm like, can we at least fix this? Can we fix this? And maybe he fixed a few of them, but I didn't feel like coming back to him after it's already, I don't know, been out. So I'm just saying, clean it up as much as you can. You don't know. I mean, but then conversely, I wouldn't be afraid. I wouldn't, I didn't like some of the edits, and I think we had some issues with the National Review, but I felt like, they're just rewording it in a way that, but I didn't feel like it was anything substantial. Did
Right.
you?
No.
I didn't feel like, but every once in a while, I have gone to battle at something with First Things when they took an essay, and I know it needed shortening, but did they have to take out the entire crux of the argument right in the center of it, the whole arc of the essay, so I did come back to him and say, look, I'm sorry, but this point's got to be in here. This thing at the end doesn't make any sense if you take that out, and they did put it back in and cut something else out. So you can come back to them, and they'll respect you for that, but usually nobody likes to be edited. I'm sure from, you guys get edited a ton, but if it's just stylistic, I'd let it go. It's their style or their magazine. Okay, and then just really quick, and we can, Alan said we could brainstorm a little bit together. So, but just to get through, Alan wanted me to talk about co-authoring and the model we've used, which, I think we've kind of gone over that. I've had a great experience working with Alan and Dave, and mostly because Alan totally understands my weird life. I mean, I've got 8 kids. Only 2 are at home, but the youngest is just giving us a run for our money and a lot of work, and I have a 94-year-old mother, and and then I have young adult kids that I worry more about than when they were 2 years old, that, and those it's like you see their name on the phone, you're like, oh, do I want to hear this? Do I really want to? Anyway, so I don't know. We've had a good thing going because Alan knows he could say, hey, I've got this great idea, and I can write back and say, how about in 3 months? How about we not even talk about it right now? How about we talk about it in 3 months and then we write it then? Or, just fall is good for me, usually after the holidays, not in the summer. I don't know. So that's been a real comfort zone for me, and we've been really compatible because he lets me write, but he's a good writer. He sends me great material, and then I'm totally fine. He usually edits it for the better, and it's sort of a back and forth thing. I don't know that everybody would, but it's not like he writes a paragraph, I write a paragraph. No. It's more, you send me.
I write an essay and I send it, here, Betsy, do your thing.
and you kind of let me do my thing, but I know it's not perfect, and
then I'll
you
make
come back
changes,
and make it respectable. But then, and I've really liked, you can also, I liked writing about Dave's work too. And now we'll try and collaborate and see if I can get over my embarrassment with First Things and move forward with that.
I want to put a plug in for what Betsy did. She took our theory piece on dualities at the heart of religion and family life. It's coming out in the Journal of Family and Family Theory and Review. Out very soon. It's a pretty complex, sophisticated theoretical piece, and Betsy took it and made it readable and enjoyable for an average person. It was quite a stunning translation, distillation. I'm not quite sure what the right words are, but she took a big, long, boring theory piece and made it a short, interesting, applied popular piece. It was incredibly impressive.
Well,
and I didn't look at it and say, that's not our theory. That this is unrecognizable. I thought, wow, that's the essence of our ideas, and now real people can read it and maybe benefit. So it was marvelous.
Well, but I appreciate you kind of tiptoed me through that too and gave me further explanation, and I definitely know that I'm way, I'm wading into this not really knowing what I'm doing. So I do try and make sure we get it right.
Humble, and you were very
So
kind, but you did.
Well, thank you, Dave. Anyway, every writer is going to have their own process, and you just have to try co-authoring. Ideas that I've thought of, again, Hal Boyd at Deseret News has done stuff for the Atlantic. I don't think this is quite McKay Coppin's field, but he could be maybe a contact. I don't know. Or,
Yeah, I've got his contact information, and he might know some other. I don't think his writing style is quite what
Yeah.
we need, but he might know some others. We are committed to trying to create a pool of Betsy's.
Well, I was going to tell you that these two that I've worked with at Mormon Newsroom, I don't know, for one thing or another, Samuel Hislop, and I've got all their contact information, has written some very thoughtful interfaith pieces. And I've just been impressed with his approach, his generosity for other faiths and ideas. And I know he's interested in doing more outside the Mormon newsroom. Nathan Nilsson is a really talented writer over there, and I've told him, I said, I read something he wrote for Mormon Newsroom, and I said, you could approach First Things with something like that, and he's gone on to do a couple of pieces for them, and I know they'd be good collaborators. I don't know. I do have a lot of writing friends, but most of them are in publishing. They're not LDS. They're definitely, they probably don't write proclamation-friendly things. Although I will say this, that and maybe I'll end with this. I just wanted to conclude with a note about preaching to the choir, and is it worth publishing in more of these conservative places? And I will say a resounding yes, because, and I like Alan's approach, is that it's going to be really hard to convert people to your side, but those who are like tenuously on your side and wondering if they're crazy, they need some bolstering. And every time I read Rod Dreher's, he's always writing about his Benedict option, and in that book he really gives, I haven't read the book, but I've read his excerpts, and he looks to the Mormons as having a Benedict option. We have our enclaves, we have our wards, we have our scouts and all our hokey whatever, mutual and this and that, and it really gives us a community in which to live our values. But a lot of people out there don't have this, and they're hungry for it, and I mean, a lot of our own are hungry for it, and they may kind of just out of a faith paradigm want to walk that line, but it really helps to have some intellectual bolstering, and it's been extremely gratifying for me to see stuff that I've written for Real Clear Religion, which that's a small niche. I mean, not a lot of people go to that website, but the ones who do are faith leaders, and they spread the pieces and they get around, and so it's interesting to discover that some Muslim website is, highlighting something you've written on teaching youth morals, or a Jewish site did once, and this big, kind of progressive Presbyterian site highlighted something that I'd written for First Things. And so, and I will say, I come to my Facebook page posting stuff like we just did in National Review, or kind of more conservative pieces, and I'm just ready for my progressive publishing friends to just unfriend me, block you, a pox on thee and all your houses, and I've been surprised. I really, and I'm sure some of them are just being nice, but others, it really has meant something to them, and they have in their own way been hungry for it, and they've engaged with it, and You know, I had a super progressive Jewish friend come back to me on Facebook about the consensual non-monogamy thing and say, you know, I could tell where you were getting at some of those insinuations that I wasn't too comfortable with, but overall, this was very well done. And, you know, I mean, props to you and your authors. And by the way, it didn't just go to the choir, because a lot of CNM people, that went around in their universe, and they came back and they were battling it out in the comment section. And you know, if you get a robust comment section, you did the right thing, even if you have to cringe through half of it and people are mad at you or whatever. So anyway, rah, rah, rah. There you go. And here's a collection of bullet points, if that helps.
Tell us what the Benedict option is.
You know, I haven't read the book, but it's Rod Dreher's cry to Christians that they need to regroup and come together. And, you know, I mean, he gets upset when people, thank you again, Lene. Thank you. Yeah. So the negative reviews of Benedict option from Christians and, you know, secular alike are saying, you guys, you know, you just want to go into your, you know, to retreat, not, yeah, and become a monastery and don't interact and not be exposed to new ideas. But Rod Dreher's made a robust defense that is not it. It's coming into our retreats to get strength and then going back out there and taking it with you. That's what he'll say it is. So, and that, again, that's gotten a lot of traction. People are talking about that. It's an interesting concept, and it could even fit into your, you know, your little family home evening Benedictine retreat, you know. So, I don't know.
Excellent.
It's a good book. It's worth reading.
Did you like it, Dave?
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
Similar, and he, you know, I was, because I read the same things you read, I was hoping for more about Mormons, and it's really only a few little things here and there. But he does acknowledge that we do a better job than most at being a tightly knit community. And he says those faiths who don't strongly build community are going to simply get swept away in the tsunami of secular, of all the stuff that's going on. And so it's an interesting argument, and a lot of Mormons have taken to it. You know, he's not saying we need to be like the Amish, I think, or the Hasidic Jews. I think he's saying we need to be more like modern Orthodox Jews and Mormons who are in the world but not of the world in a really meaningful way in both of those. So they're not retreating from the world, not building huge walls, but nor are they assimilating. They're having a clear community with also reaching out. So I think it's a good argument.
Well, and one thing I really appreciate about Rod Dreher, and he's got a huge following of, I don't know, this blog, and people interact with it, and a lot of people come into it from progressive sides too, because he's open-minded. But he makes a strong case that you throw sexual ethics and biblical morality under the bus, your congregation, it wipes out the congregation. I mean, you know, this isn't just this weird little hang-up that Mormons or Catholics or whatever have. It really is part of Christianity. It's the sexual mores, and I don't know. I just respect that about him. So.
Betsy said she'd be willing to stay on a little bit to talk to you individually about some interests that you have. Her resources are scarce, and so we may need to manage them and prioritize them. But you know, we'll kind of do an official end. But people are free to linger and talk with each other and with Betsy. But Betsy, thank you.
Thank you. This was really fun. Thanks for the lunch too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.